The pandemic really put a spotlight on transportation, which, when I was graduating from college, to be in transportation, you were like the person that you did your job well if the apple was always on the shelf and nobody questioned it, right? But the pandemic made it really obvious that we all are so connected to our transportation systems and our freight and our cargo. And I think the Great Lakes we're like the road runner, right? We're like starting to move our legs, but we're not quite moving forward yet. And I feel like that's maybe how we were at the beginning of the pandemic. But the pandemic, we started acting as a relief valve. And we were getting noticed as hey, wait a minute, the West Coast congested, the East Coast congested, but look at this great waterway that's not really congested because we can double the use on our waterway without adding additional infrastructure.
Right now.
And so right now, we could double the traffic and still have 98% reliability, in ships moving, cargo moving. And that's where we really got this containerized maritime containerized cargo started, was because there was a local customer that said, I have all these kidney beans and I just cannot get them off the coast. And they worked with a trucking company and a container company and us, and we worked with a vessel line, and we came up with a solution to get their kidney beans in a container and get them to Europe through Duluth. And it may not have been the most economical to start, but they had no other option at that point because they just couldn't get them out. Well, now this year, we've seen supply chain on the coast kind of settle a little bit. We're not seeing the 70 ships off the coast of LA like we were during the pandemic. But that customer continues to utilize the supply chain that they created through Duluth. It may not be the most economical yet, but it diversifies the risk in supply chain. It gives them this relief valve if and when transportation becomes an issue again. And I think the more we can get those trials, showing people that we can do it effectively, efficiently, the more economical it's going to become. And like you said, the bigger impact we're going to have on our economy.
You mentioned the risk factor and the economic factor of this kidney bean individual or the company involved in that. Businesses are forced to make some really, really tough choices with their dollars, right?
Absolutely.
And sometimes if we only look at dollars, we miss the bigger point. And I often talk in my conversations just with business owners in general and so on, the word risk for me, it's right up there.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm looking at making an investment decision or whatever it is, risk and money are equal. You give one for the other, right?
Yes.
And given what we learned during the pandemic is most of us had not given up enough money for the risk assurance. And I don't think...
Unless you were the Walmart or Amazon of the world that could open your own port.
Right, exactly. But I don't think that memories like that have a hard time dying. So hopefully the lessons are there and more folks go forward with this kidney bean. It's awesome.
It's wonderful.
And so no matter what I think happens in the shipping industry, hopefully he continues or that company continues to utilize that and tells other people about that.
Yeah, that's...
Right? Because for you and what the Port Authority is up to, you were just telling me yesterday when you came over to our facility for a different association meeting about traveling around the world. I think in a week or two, do you go to?
Yeah, I leave for Norway in a week, and I'll be in Rotterdam and selling the Port of Duluth-Superior.
So you're selling the Port of Duluth-Superior, but when you walk in and you have a meeting with whoever this is, what are they shocked to hear about Duluth-Superior?
The Port of Duluth-Superior is a member under an organization called Highway H2O. Highway H2O is the brand given to the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway System. And then ports and vessel companies and facility operators are all kind of under this umbrella. And I do think we've gained some traction in the international market as of late. Probably in the last, I don't know when that brand was created, probably in the last 15 years. We've been making a show we've been appearing at more shows. We have Highway H2O, which is a conglomeration between the U.S. government and Canadian government. We actually have somebody that lives in England that works for Highway H2O. So he's kind of spreading our message on the European side. So I think we have made some headway into that. But as we talked about earlier about turnover, there's turnover constantly, which means that we are just constantly re-educating people on the United States, on the Great Lakes. People seem to innately know about the Mississippi River and that there are barges on that. But how do they not know about the big Great Lakes and the vessels on there if they know about barges on the Mississippi River? So it's a constant re-education process. If people know the United States and hear that the Great Lakes can accept vessels, they go, whoa, no way. But I would tell you that I've had that exact same reaction from someone who lives in Texas. So it's not just the international market we have to educate, it's even the North American market.
That's so fascinating. And is it because when we learn about the Great Lakes in school and we learn anything about the Great Lakes is always how clean it is, the largest freshwater lake in the world, all this stuff, we never hear about the economic benefit of the cargo moving on it. Whereas when you learn about the Mississippi, first you got to learn how to spell the thing, right? So that's
there's a lot of S's
right.
and a lot of I's.
So we just got to figure out how to make kids start to learn how to spell superior across the world, and then maybe you'll have it. There's a little acronym, but I know when I was in school anyways, you hear about Mississippi, and that's what you're hearing about is the movement, the economic benefit of the river just as much as anything else. So I think you're right. When I travel around, people are like, you work in a port, what do you mean? Because they'll ask, what's your industrial experience? And we'll tell them, well, I don't know, we load 7 millions of, or we're involved in 7 millions of coal every year, and there's grain that moves out of our facility. We've automated a ship loader to make sure that iron ore doesn't land in the lake because that wouldn't be good for our nice clean lake. And they're, whoa, where do you live?
Yeah, people, isn't that incredible?
It really is. And I think even in the high schools, maybe we could start doing a little better job educating everyone, even locally, just the impact. I know there's some things my kids have done with school. They go out with WLSSD and the like, and they do some St. Louis River Quest stuff.
River Quest is actually something that the Duluth-Seaway Port Authority has been involved with since it started.
Okay, awesome.
So
and I think more of that as it's
program.
educating people, they come up through the ranks and they hear about it. So that's funny, though, that you say in Texas, they're just as surprised.
Yeah, I think it falls back to kind of what you were saying earlier. Like, you go get your bread, but you don't really think about the grain. I think the same thing happens. Yeah, the Great Lakes are these boundless adventure land of clean water, right? But industry is proud of that too. We want clean water just like everybody else does. But I am always impressed or disappointed that nobody knows about what else happens on the Great Lakes,
right.
Especially Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway System. I'll say it again because it's so impressive. If we were a little country, 8 Great Lakes states and 2 Canadian provinces, 3rd largest GDP in the world.
That's going to be a huge selling point when you're out visiting with folks internationally. That, hey, you might hear of the coasts, the Gulf Coast,
right.
The West Coast, East Coast, but did you actually know that that would be the 3rd largest?
Yes.
Do people spin their head at you when you mention it? Is that part of your sales pitch?
It isn't so much as talking about, I think it's hard to talk about GDP necessarily with like somebody who cares about getting their widget across the ocean.
Okay.
But I think what we try to talk about, especially as kind of Highway H2O, is you get access to, yes, Duluth-Superior, the furthest inland freshwater port in the world, Duluth-Superior. But you also have 40 other ports along this waterway that you can do business with. So I think when we talk kind of a more global perspective is really trying to sell not only the Port of Duluth-Superior, but also really showing that our system as a whole has access to a vast amount of population. Think about the Port of Duluth-Superior. Well, we're just spitting distance away from the Twin Cities. And so think about all the population that is around the Great Lakes. And you don't have to go to an East Coast or a West Coast and rail it in and truck it and rail and truck and boat. And you can bring a boat right into the heartland of North America and position your cargo right next to those massive population areas.
Which I also would imagine, not only can you bring your cargo in that, but then the transportation cost has to be more affordable if you have all those the optionality of the ship
Yeah.
coming in loaded, hopefully leaving loaded.
Yep.
That's probably
we
big.
try to balance cargo in the
Okay.
Great Lakes. Yep.
Do we end up sending a lot of ships back empty?
Believe it or not, more ships come in empty than out empty.
Okay.
So the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway System's historical movement was steel in, grain out. Every year is a little different if you think about tariffs and the political environment and monetary policy, all the things that come with global trade and pricing. You know, some years it's advantageous to take more of something out than bring something in, right? And so, but last year I know we saw vessels ballasting into the Great Lakes to haul grain out of like a Lake Erie port or something like that.
Okay.
It's very unusual for the Port of Duluth to have something ballasted in, just because we are the furthest inland seaport.
Okay, so lots of challenges in the overall industry of transportation, which you're highly and keenly aware of. But and I think it's just so awesome to sit down next to you and feel your energy with it, and I can see why your excitement for our international presence is just awesome. I think the
thank
port
you.
has a really good individual
Oh,
helping
thank
us.
you. I
helping us
appreciate
sell,
that. Thank you.
because energy is important.
It
you know,
is
in all forms.
passion.
Yes.
Yes.
Right. So I love that passion. But how, I'm just sitting here as we're talking and thinking, even after our conversation yesterday, that all the challenges in the grain industry and the coal industry and just the continual, there's so many different entities involved in every one of these. You got your truckers, you got your railroads, you got your shipping, then you have the various commodity cycles, you have a political environment. There's a lot to balance.
All of the
there,
above.
Kate.
Yes.
So how do you maintain this high degree of energy
Yeah.
as you're ripping around the world telling people they should do business in Duluth-Superior?
Well, thank you. I do try to show my passion in a positive light. I am very passionate about industry. I think that's one of the reasons that I'm able to keep a high level of excitement. I'm definitely fortunate to be one of those people that it's like I come to work every day and I'm happy and I love my job. And but I think when it really comes down to how do you keep all those things straight and how do you go around the world and be happy and excited is there's a lot of great networking. There's people that are out there doing this too, that have the same passion, which is really, encouraging. But I also feel like we're making a big difference. And I think that that's why I feel so encouraged, why I am so passionate, is because there aren't enough people out there, in my opinion, there aren't enough people out there focused on ports and transportation and industry and making a difference in the community that they're in by utilizing those assets. We have an amazing set of assets here in the Port of Duluth-Superior, right? We have a waterway that is uncongested. We have roadways that are uncongested. We have railways. We have 4 Class 1 railroads here in Duluth-Superior. That's amazing. We have pipelines. We have air. We have all 5 modes of transportation right here in the Port of Duluth-Superior. And I think that being able to be a spokesperson for that, being able to be someone that can go out and say how important these things are, that gives me energy too. Meeting people like you who are like, yes, go port. And like, this is a great thing to have in our community. Thank you. I mean, thank you for being that supporter, because it isn't always this easy of a conversation to have around why industry is important, why our waterfront industrial property is so important, especially when you see, tourism is a really big focus here in Duluth. Rightfully so. We have a beautiful place, but we at the Port Authority believe in a vibrant community that has all kinds of educational and employment opportunities that include industry. And all of those things give me energy and keep me going.
Well, and for good reason, because it is. There's so much renewed energy when you start seeing some success. And given the port's success, there should be energy there. I also think sometimes the tourism industry, forgets that how impactful having a laker come through underneath a bridge is.
I love that you said that.
It's so huge for the tourism industry in
Yeah.
our community.
We tell people all the time the number one tourist attraction in Duluth, Minnesota is a vessel coming underneath the bridge. And so I always tell people, well, then let's make sure that there's land and industry that can support those vessels coming under the bridge and put the motel up on top of the hill,
Right.
not down by the water. Yeah, you can't push. I always say you can't push 1,000-footer up a hill.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. Very valid point. So with this energy, though, there's obviously times where, as a business owner, I've had to just decide, like, the political environment is what it is, or the energy transition is what it is, and I try and tell our team to, like, let's not waste our brain space on things we cannot control. Let's instead use our brain space on how we're going to navigate those things that are outside of our control. And in your specific industry in transportation, there's a lot of that, not just even, here in America, but you're dealing with Canadians, you're dealing with Europeans, and I'm sure that is always changing. There's got to be setbacks that happen.
Yeah, I could point to a couple of things, especially in transportation in the United States, for our agriculture friends. Every state has a different weight limit on a truck. How do you cross states with a load of grain when you're allowed to have 100,000-pound weight limit in North Dakota and an 80,000-pound limit here in Minnesota? There are things that you can advocate for. Let's try to have a system that works and is equal across all areas so that we're not, because really what that does is push traffic in a way it doesn't want to go. It's not a natural flow when you have those kinds of barriers. So that's really, I think, especially in the political environment, I think we try to find items, which, let me be clear, I am not our government and political person in our office, but I think we try to find things that we can make a difference on, trying to get permitting to be clear and have a timeline. I think a lot of us in industry can get behind that, and I think we're there too. Trying to get maybe road restrictions changed or things that we can actually impact, because there are so many things that you just can't. But vote. That's what we tell people. Vote.
Vote. But just given all those challenges and the things that you have to work through, by the time you actually see a project come through successfully, like the kidney bean story,
yes,
that's got to be like such a celebration in your guys' office.
Yes.
When you see that vessel leave.
Yeah, so we have partners. We have a working partnership. So the way the Port Authority works is in the 50s, we were also given a large tract of land. It's now called the Clure Public Marine Terminal. Within our legislation, we are given the right to either operate that ourselves or have an agent operate it for us. And so for the last 30 plus years, we have had an agent operating it for us, Lake Superior Warehouse. And together we make this brand called Duluth Cargo Connect. So even just setting up that brand was a win for us, because it used to be we would both attend an event and hand out two different cards and people would be like, who are you, And so now we operate and market under one brand, Duluth Cargo Connect. But that is the partnership that gets to celebrate these huge successes. So in order to have containerized trade through the Port of Duluth, you have to have the infrastructure, right, that supports it. We had to have some Customs and Border Protection facility set up, which took dollars and negotiating. And, it's a process to get that kind of a space set up that works. So there were some regulatory hurdles to jump through. There's infrastructure. I think we've put in over $30 million in infrastructure on the Port Authority property in the last 6 years.
Wow.
So we are talking about major dollars, job creation with that infrastructure that lets us do these really cool transportation options. So that kidney bean shipper, that is a win for all kinds of reasons. We spent the money on infrastructure and it's being used how we wanted. we got through the regulatory process. Our terminal operator, Lake Superior Warehouse, has got this new customer and this great new avenue for offering cargo opportunities to the world. And so, yes, it is more than even you would read in the paper, a big moment for us at the Duluth Seaway Port Authority, Duluth Cargo Connect, Lake Superior Warehouse, and we all celebrate together. But it's all driven, I'm going to come back to our mission. It's all driven as part of that mission of regional economic development, because what we think is that by creating new transportation alternatives, new supply chains, new optionality, new ways to get cargo into the global environment is supporting economic development, is supporting our region, is supporting our growers, ranchers, manufacturers, industry. So that's why we do it.
And again, it's getting done very well. I mean, we're talking over 8,000 jobs. We're talking $1.8 billion plus in economic development. We're talking about all the secondary stuff that comes from it. We're talking about the beautiful port that we have here.
Yeah.
It's just, and hey, when we're in Norway next time or we're overseas next time, who knows what product you're picking up off the shelf. Maybe you're actually, I don't know who eats the kidney beans. I'm not a kidney bean eater. But
do you like chili?
I
Kidney
hate
bean.
chili.
Oh, okay. No,
So that's why. But
fail.
Kate, it's just so funny because as a resident, as an employer, as just somebody hanging out in the Twin Ports, very active in the energy industry, I can get super passionate about that. But as I've gotten into that, I've just realized maybe we forgot as Americans where all of this stuff really comes from, and the dirty hands that have to go into all of this. Whether you're flying over to London to have a meeting, or you're over in, a different city in Europe trying to negotiate something, or over on the West Coast trying to figure something out as part of the port job, whether you're the farmer that's growing the wheat or the person that's processing the kidney bean, or whether you're moving oil and gas, like there's so much of that behind the scenes that we've just come to expect naturally to happen in the form of a piece of clothing, in the form of a piece of bread. Yeah, we don't realize what's behind that. So the more that we at Westcom can assist in getting the message out to folks that there is serious energy that goes into all of this as we continue to take care of ourselves and the entire world. And there's these little hidden stories like this of the port. When I'm looking out my window or sitting out on the deck having my Sunday morning coffee, I live up on the shore a bit, and I'm away from the lake, but I have a decent view. And that ship rolls by, and then the next day I see in the paper that we're celebrating the fact that we're now shipping out kidney beans. I'm like, well, who cares? It's just a kidney bean, right? But
now you know better.
Now I know a lot better, right? And I think there's just so much of that untold stories as you go. I just want to wrap it up by saying a couple of things. One is don't ever lose that enthusiasm, because it is so necessary for us as we continue, because we're all in this together.
Absolutely.
Right? If we don't have a port here, it's not just the Twin Ports that suffers. It's our Minneapolis friends, it's our Dakota friends, and it stretches all the way into Montana.
Canada.
Right, up into
Iowa,
Canada.
Kansas.
And by the way, because we're so good, the West Coast, the East Coast, and the Gulf Coast have had to get better.
That's right. We're driving change.
We are absolutely a huge part of that. So keep up your enthusiasm. And then secondly, I hope you guys can continue to, and I say guys loosely because I know you're a female in a male-dominated industry, but the folks in the port industry can continue to navigate these challenges, because I don't feel like those are going away, right?
No. Yes.
As we look long-term, we're going to have to stay very strategic and be willing to sit down with each other and just acknowledge some of the realities. As a person in the oil and gas business, I used to just kind of fight this whole idea of oil and gas going, it's in a decline state long term. But I think it's going to take quite a while for it to.
It'll be well past our time.
Well past our time. But I still think it's like you can sit there and argue about that all day long,
right,
or you can try and navigate some of these changes, right? How can we do it better? Because people truly care.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what you guys are doing well, and I hope you can continue to do well as being there for that change.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on. I know it's nerve-wracking anytime we just sit down and have a conversation.
I thought it was great. I really appreciate it. The Port Authority really appreciates being on, and I hope that somebody learned something. And we are always open to hosting groups and trade teams and even just folks that have questions. DuluthPort.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.